What's up, chat? Late video today. Happy Sunday. Good day today. I haven't mentioned it in the intros of my videos, but tomorrow will be a kind of game for what's called an SU Masters, which is going to be like a small little tournament / competition game that we're playing when it comes to golf. So tomorrow we're just going to be more competitive style, of course, alternate shots with a partner of mine. Needless to say, what I did today was just practice, just dial in the shot. We'll see how we do tomorrow. I'm definitely going to do a video after the game, and then I'll give you guys an update on that. But without further ado, Talking to Strangers by Malcolm Gladwell. Number 4. The best answer we have to that question comes from a study conducted by Harvard economist. There are 3 elite computer scientists and a Bail expert from the University of Chicago. The group, and for simplicity's sake, I'll refer to it by the economic's name, Sendhil Molynathan, decided to use New York City as their testing ground. They gathered up the records of 554,689 defendants brought before arraignment hearings in New York from 2008 to 2013. 669,000 defendants in all. Of those, they found that the human judges of New York released just over 40,000 people. Huanathi then built an artificial intelligence system, fed it the same information the prosecutors had given judges in those arraignment cases, the defendant's age and criminal record, and told the computer to go through those 554,669 cases and make its own list of 40,000 people to release. It was a bake-off, man versus machine, who made the best decisions, whose list committed the fewer crimes while out on bail, and was most likely to show up on their trial date. The results weren't even close. The people on the computer's list were 25% less likely to commit a crime while awaiting trial than the 40,000 people released by the judges of New York City. 25% in the bake-off, machine destroyed man. To give you just one sense of the mastery of Nathan's machine, it flagged 1% of all the defendants as high risks. Those are the people the computer thought should never be released prior to trial. According to the machine's calculations, well over half of the people that in that high-risk group would commit another crime if let out on bail. When the human judges looked at the same group of bad apples, though, they didn't identify them as dangerous at all. They released 48.5% of them. Many of the defendants flagged by the algorithm as high risk was treated by the judge as if they were low risk. Team Nathan concluded in a particularly devastating passage. Performing this exercise suggests that judges are not simply setting a high threshold for detention, but are misranking defendants. The marginal defendants they select to detain are drawn from throughout the entire predicted risk distribution. Translation: the bail decisions of judges are all over the place. I think you'll agree that this is baffling. When judges make their bail decisions, they have access to 3 sources of information. They have the defendant's record, his age, previous offenses, what happened the last time he was granted bail, where he lives, where he works. They have the testimony of the district attorney and the defendant's lawyer, whatever information is communicated in the courtroom, and they have the evidence of their own eyes. What is my feeling about this man before me? Nathan's computer, on the other hand, couldn't see the defendant, and it couldn't hear anything that was said in the courtroom. All it had was the defendant's age, a rap sheet. It had a fraction of the information available to the judge, and it did a much better job at making bail decisions. In my second book, Blink, I told the story of how orchestras made much smarter recruiting decisions once they had prospective hires audition behind a screen. Taking information away from the hiring committee made for better judgment, but that was because the information gleaned from watching someone play is largely irrelevant. If you're judging whether someone is good is a good violin player. Knowing whether that person is big or small, handsome or homely, white or black isn't going to help. In fact, it will probably only introduce biases that will make your job even harder. When it comes to a bail decision, the extra information the judge has sounds like it should be really useful. In an earlier case in Solomon's courtroom, a young man in basketball shorts and a gray t-shirt was charged with getting into a fight with someone, then buying a car with a man stealing credit card, and asking for bail. The district attorney pointed out that he had failed to appear for his court date after 2 previous arrests. That's a serious red flag, but not all FTAs are identical. What if the defendant was given the wrong date? What if he would lose his job if he took off work that day and decided it wasn't worth it? What if his child was in his hospital? That's what the defendant's lawyer told the judge. Her client had a good excuse. The computer didn't know that, but the judge did. How could that not help? In a smaller vine, someone said this thing that's most alert to a bail case is mental illness with a allegation of violence. Those kinds of cases are a judge's worst nightmare. They let someone out on bail, then that person stops taking their medication and goes on to commit some horrible crime. It's shoot a cop, Solomon said. It's drive a car into a minivan, killing a pregnant woman and her husband. It's hurt a child. It's shoving somebody in front of a subway train and killing them. It's an awful situation at every possible angle. No judge would ever want to be the one having made the release decision on that case. Some of the clues to that kind of situation are in the defendant's file, medical records, previous hospitalization, some mention of the defendants being found not competent, but other cues are found only in that moment. You also will hear terms thrown around in the courtroom of EDP, emotional disturbed person, Solomon said, that will come from either the police department who's brought them in and handed you an envelope that's from a doctor at a hospital where he's been screened at a psychiatric ER prior to arraignment. Other times that information will get into the DA's folder and the DA will ask questions. That's a fact for me to think about. He looked at the defendant in those cases closely, carefully, searching for, as he puts it, sort of a glassy-eyed look, not being able to make eye contact and not the adolescent unable to make eye contact because the frontal lobe hasn't developed. I'm talking about the adult off their meds. Mullen Nathan's medicine can't overhear the prosecutor talking about EDP, and it can't see the telltale glassy-eyed look. That fact should translate into a big advantage for Solomon and his fellow judges, but for some reason it doesn't. Puzzle number 2. How is it that meeting a stranger can sometimes make us worse at making sense of that person not meeting them? Number 5. Neville Chamberlain made his third and final visit to Germany at the end of September 1938, 2 weeks after his first visit. The meeting was in Munich at the Nazi Party's offices, the Führer Bar. Italian leader Benito Mussolini and French Prime Minister Edouard Balladur were also invited. The 4 of them met with their allies in Hitler's private study. On the morning of the second day, Chamberlain asked Hitler if the 2 of them could meet alone. By this point, Chamberlain felt he had the measure of his adversary. When Hitler had his ambitions were limited to Slovakia, Chamberlain believed that Hitler was telling the truth. It was now just a matter of getting the commitment in writing. Hitler took him to his apartment in Prinzregentalplatz. Chamberlain pulled out a piece of paper on which he had written in simple agreement and asked Hitler whether he would sign it. As the interpreter translated the words into German, Hitler frequently ejaculated "Ja, ja," and at the end he said, "Yes, I will certainly sign it." Chamberlain later wrote to one of his sisters, "When should we do it?" I said, "Now," and we went we went at once to the writing table and put our signatures to the 2 copies which I had brought with me. That afternoon, Chamberlain flew home to a hero's welcome. A crowd of journalists surged toward him. He took the letter from his breast pocket and waved it to the crowd. This morning, I had another talk with the German Chancellor, Herr Hitler, and here is a paper which bears his name upon it as well as mine. Then it was back to the Prime Minister's residence at 10 Downing Street. My good friends, this is the second time in our history that there has come back from Germany to Downing Street peace with honor. I believe it is peace for our time. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts. The crowd cheered. Now I recommend you go home and sleep quietly in your beds. In March 1939, Hitler invaded the rest of the Slovakia. It had taken him less than 6 months to break his agreement with Chamberlain. On September 1st, 1939, Hitler invaded Poland and the world was at war. We have, in other words, CIA officers who cannot make sense of their spies, judges who cannot make sense of their defendants, and prime ministers who cannot make sense of their adversaries. We have people struggling with their first impressions of a stranger. We have people struggling when they have months to understand a stranger. We have people struggling when they meet with someone only once, and people struggling when they return to the stranger again and again. They struggle with assessing a stranger's honesty. They struggle with a stranger's character. They struggle with a stranger's intent. It's a mess. And I'll end it off there. Like I said, I really like the defendant/judge perspective that I feel like I never really got to understand. But also one thing I really want to talk about is, it's very hard to, interact with strangers in the first place, not only to build a confidence, but I think sometimes it's also out of your control, if that makes any kind of sense. Some people can be very manipulative, some people can be very persuasive, and some people are not genuine to themselves. And what I mean by that is they are not themselves. They are portraying to be this kind of person, or they're saying certain things that make you feel some kind of way. For example, Chamberlain, the idea that they were kind of building a relationship. They thought that their agreement would solve things, but in reality, Hitler still had different motives, even though he was communicating different motives, if that makes sense. He was communicating it differently. And in Chamberlain's perspective, or at least what I can take away from that, is that it's out of her control. She tried her best to not only get to know Hitler, which is a very risky move, because, obviously people had a very negative connotation around him. So, yeah, it's very interesting for sure. One thing to take away for sure is that sometimes it is out of your control, and you can try your hardest to meet with people, meet new friends, but at the end of the day, it's hard to really be in someone else's shoes or in their mind and their hearts to gauge what are really motives, what do they really want out of not only in life, but in the relationship that you have with them. So yeah. And off there, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Like I said, I'm really excited about this golf game. So, peace.